Okay, and what happens is that hopefully this recording will also be useful for participants subsequently, right? Because as we have experienced during last year's series of webinars for FA Math, right? What we found was that actually, while we have catered some time for our hands-on session, some of us may need the additional time, perhaps, to revisit the recording and then fiddle with the system separately. Okay, so we will start the recording and hopefully make it available so that you can also view this recording separately at your own time. Okay, so without further ado, I'm just going to start, and there are still some participants who are joining us. Okay, so maybe let's just go straight into what the ALS is. Okay, so before that, right, actually at the point of registration, we actually asked questions about what you want to know regarding the adaptive learning system. Okay, so what I've done is actually collated all the responses. Okay, and I've enlisted the help of pair chat, right, to summarize the main areas of interest, if you will. Okay, so this is what pair gave me. Okay, it's summarized into anyway. My prompt was to summarize the key areas that participants are interested to find out about. Okay, I'm just going to frame the sharing today, right, by talking about a few things: the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, as well as the how. Okay, so who, what, when, where, how, why, and how, right? The 5 W's and 1 H. Okay, so today's sharing will be a lot about the what. What exactly ALS is about? Okay, what are some of the affordances of the system? Okay, and so on, right? The when and the where, we will also talk a bit about it. Meaning to say, uh, when can we use ALS, right? Or what are the scenarios, okay, in which we envision the use of ALS to be useful for the learning of our students, right? When it comes to mathematics, okay, we'll talk a bit about the who. So, right, from the student's perspective, what does it look like? From the teacher's perspective, what does it look like, right? We'll also talk about the how, okay, which is, actually how a little bit about how the system works, okay, and how we can tap on the system to enhance our teaching and learning practices. But let me just also use this slide, right? And I've underlined all these lines here to really talk about the why. Okay, so adaptive learning system as a concept is not new. If you have heard the news, and minister has been talking about it for quite some time now already. Okay, and in fact we have piloted it at the primary level. Okay, over the past 1 or 2 years. Okay, so adaptive learning system is not new, but why is it that we want to talk about adaptive learning system, and how does it look like for mathematics? I think the value proposition is quite clear. Okay, as you have pointed out, it is really a vehicle for us to personalize the learning for our students. Okay, and how this can do that is really, right, tapping on the system, right, the affordances of it, right, to customize it down to the student level. And with that customization and personalization, right, we are really able to support students of very different profiles. Okay, and in particular for mathematics, because the subject is quite spiral in nature, right? You know the spiral nature of our curriculum, where concepts built upon previous knowledge. So the adaptive learning system is very useful in that sense because we can use that system, okay, to assess whether do students need additional revisits, for example, okay, to revise some of their prior knowledge, or are they ready enough, let's say if they are slightly higher readiness or higher ability, right, to progress ahead of the class, for example. Okay, so these are some of the affordances, and what we also want to develop in our students is really the ability for the self-directed learning lah. Okay, in 2 or 3 minutes, right, I'm not able to summarize all the affordances and the value of ALS, but I hope that just these points alone, which was brought up by participants, not by me, right, may give you an inkling as to why we want to use ALS in a very sustained manner for our students. Okay, so hopefully throughout the course of today's sharing, you will be better able to see the value of ALS and of course how then it applies to our own classrooms. Okay, before we move on to the technical part of it, right, I just also want to frame the sharing in two aspects. Okay, so there will be a part of the sharing that is focusing on how the system works. Okay, what the system looks like, the interface, and how the students go through the different learning loops. Okay, so that is system specific. Okay, there is another part of the sharing which is about how it looks like in the mathematics classroom. Okay, so I want to kind of frame this sharing in these two kind of baskets, because what happens is that the system, okay, will be similar for the other subjects that subsequently come on board. Okay, meaning to say that if, let's say, subsequently science comes on board the adaptive learning system, you will have known how the system works already because you have attended today's sharing, right? So the system and the engine itself is common, right? Then the other part is really how then it applies to mathematics. So take this away and keep this in your mind as we go through the sharing for today. Okay. Okay, so without further ado, I'm just going to go straight into the adaptive learning system. Okay, which is that it's essentially a system that analyzes our students' input, okay, to the learning content and the questions. And how the system works is that it will have a way of measuring the students' mastery of particular concepts. Okay, and based on that indicator, right, the system is then able to customize that recommendation to the student at the student level, right? Meaning to say, if let's say the system has determined that she has mastered a particular concept, it will recommend perhaps the next concept for students to master or to learn about, right? If the system has determined that perhaps this student needs some revisiting, it will also recommend, right, for students to revise prior concepts and so on. So that is the beauty of it, right? It is adaptive based on student input. Okay, and it's really a tool for us to customize the learning down to the student level, right? And how does it do that? Okay, it provides different learning pathways, okay, and different questions, in fact, right, to assess the students' mastery. And students can actually do that at their own time. Okay, let's say even after class, they can access the system, right, and use the ALS on their own. Okay, and then of course there is this added layer, right, which is that with all these data, okay, how can both students and teachers make use of that to inform their own kind of learning progress? Okay, so we will talk a bit about this subsequently, right? Okay, so I'm just going to show you a video of ALS, okay? And hopefully we'll just take these 2 minutes and hear a little bit more about what the system can offer.
Most people are trapped building someone else's business. I found a way to build mine while having more free time than ever.
Personalized learning, data-driven teaching. Ever wish they were more than just marketing slogans? Nor introducing the Adaptive Learning System, or the ALS. Your students choose any topic in a subject, and ALS will recommend a personalized pathway appropriate for each child. As they learn, the ALS tests them and recommends content they can revisit if they haven't quite mastered each concept. Already covered the material in class? Students can choose the Mastery Check mode to skip the content and go straight to check their understanding. Want to revise a previous topic? ALS automatically adjusts their mastery levels over time based on the forgetting curve and recommends the topic that they most need to revisit. Need to prepare for a test? They can choose the Test Myself mode and the list of topics they want and get a test created especially for them. Why use ALS rather than other intelligent tutoring systems out there? For one, ALS is designed not only for students' self-learning, but keeps teachers in the loop. Teachers receive updates on each student through the teacher dashboard and can recommend specific topics, which the ALS prioritizes in its recommendations. The ALS also works together with other capabilities of the Singapore student learning space, including learning feedback assistants. These assistants can automark open-ended questions, ensuring that the ALS assessments are not limited to multiple choice questions or fill in the blanks. This allows the ALS to be used for a wider range of more unstructured subjects, including languages and the humanities. You might be wondering, why haven't I heard about this before? Well, for the last 3 years, ALS has only been available for a few primary 5 and 6 mathematics topics, and more recently, upper secondary geography. But no more. Schools interested to try ALS for themselves can now do so by using their own content map, content, and questions. Imagine being able to know how well each student has mastered a topic within 3 to 5 questions. Imagine getting detailed reports of how each lesson you design has contributed to this mastery. Imagine knowing how demanding or valid your assessment items are. Imagine getting recommendations on how to revise your content map and which concepts should be taught first. Write to the AIED office and we will help you tap on the transformative power of adaptivity and learning data today. The Singapore Student Learning Space. Learn deeper. Teach better. Built leaner.
Okay, so just to share that actually, right, only mathematics as well as upper secondary geography are on board ALS lah. Right, mathematics has been on board for quite a few years, and that's really as a result of us being on the pilot. Even in 2022, right, we were already piloting with some of the primary schools and so on. We took some of the learning with us, right, in the design of the resources at the secondary level as well. Okay, so let me just go into the so-called different learning modes, and I'm trying my best not to be too technical, okay, because I understand from the pre sort of session survey that in fact most of us have not heard about the ALS. So I'm just going to try and use some of the terms that some of these terms may look a bit foreign to you, but I'm just trying to make it so that you can relate it to what we are already doing in the classroom. Okay, so in ALS, there are so-called 4 different learning modes, and we will go through this later during the hands-on, right? Cover quite a bit of it later. But basically, right, it has 4 modes, which is number 1, the guided learning approach, which is basically it's a very deliberate sequencing where you go through the introduction of a concept, the development of the concept, and then perhaps after that, students get to practice with some practice questions, and then they proceed on to the quiz, right? For mastery check is really for students who are more confident, all right? They think that they perhaps don't need the introduction and the concept development. They want to go straight into the quiz to, challenge themselves, right? Okay, revision, I don't need to talk about that, right? It's really to look back at some of the concepts that they have previously gone through, and reassess whether they have retained some of these concepts, right? So that is a revision. And the test myself is a feature that we have been working quite closely with ETD for this feature, and it's really the idea of having the interleaved and distributed kind of practice, right? Because if we do concept by concept itself, that's really just block practice. But we also want students to be able to demonstrate the mastery in an interleaved manner, right? So that's the test myself mode. Okay, so these 4 modes, we'll get to see a bit of it later, right? Okay, and I won't go even into what is ALP1, ALP2, ALP3, but just think of it as introduction, concept development, practice, and quiz. All right. Okay, which we are familiar with, right? In our classrooms, when we plan some of these as part of our lesson planning, we do think about some of these things. All right. Okay. So if you take a look at these 4 different modes, right, just keep in mind that no matter which loop, okay, the students go through in the learning process, whether it's the very scaffolded, okay, guided approach, or the one where students are very confident, they want to bypass the introduction and the practice and so on, right? You will notice that, okay, what is common is that they will all go through the quiz component. And that is really where the adaptivity is. Okay, so for the system to determine whether the student has mastered the concepts, actually that is where the system will be measuring right? Based on the students' responses to the quiz, okay, the answers and so on, right? It will be able to determine, okay, if let's say the student has mastered a certain concept, right? Now this student is ready to move on to concept 2 or concept 3, for example. Okay, and if let's say the student is not mastered, deemed to have not mastered the concept, then it will recommend additional content, maybe to revise, or maybe even some of the prior concepts to go and revisit. Okay, so that is the adaptive part of it. Okay, just to also frame your mind later, as you go through the hands-on session later, right? Perhaps one of the questions to also think about is how then can ALS work in the context of my school, my class, and my students, right? So there are a few possible ways of using ALS. Okay, I'm just going to summarize it as this. Okay, either you go using this approach where perhaps you want students to do a bit of preparation before the lesson, right? So you say, okay, before teaching a new concept, right, you get students to go and access ALS, okay, and they go and look at some of the content of the learning content that's available in the system, okay, so that they come to the class prepared. Okay, and in fact, the teacher you can use the data from the dashboard and say, okay, what are some of the possible areas that most students are having misconceptions in? That's one way. Okay, there's another way, which is that you use it in class. Okay, right? You can also use it in class. Okay, and in the context of the secondary schools, right, when students have their own personal learning devices, this is actually very doable. In fact, when we piloted it for the primary, okay, primary students will actually need to have access to the laptops and so on. But with the PLDs at the secondary level, this is actually quite doable, right? And in real time, you can actually monitor the student progress using the data that's available. So that's a second way. There's also a third way, which is that, okay, you know what? After I finish teaching the concept, I want students to go into the system and reinforce the learning after the lesson. Okay, so we'll get students, okay, you can go back after I've finished the concept, use the ALS to revise and reinforce your learning so that you master the concept. Okay, so these are just some of the different scenarios if you like, okay, in terms of how we want our students to use the ALS. Okay, here I give you an example of how the different learning modes can be used. Okay, so what happens is that, okay, after teaching new concepts in class, right, the teachers can actually ask the students to attempt either the guided learning mode, which is the very scaffolded one, go through the intro and so on, or, okay, we give the students the choice. Okay, perhaps you can also try the mastery check mode, which means they bypass the videos and so on, to go straight to the quiz. Okay, right? Then what happens is that as students go and use the system, the teacher has information about the mastery of the students and maybe possible misconceptions, right? Humi, just help me click through the, okay. Then after that, right, okay, what happens is that if the students have mastered the concepts, they can actually also use the revision mode, okay? So that, you know, if let's say they want to revise the understanding of the concepts, they can do so. They can also use test myself mode, which is what I was talking about, right? The interleaved part. Okay, so that, you know, they try to build 2 or 3 concepts together, right, in an interleaved manner to ensure that, you know, when the content is presented in an interleaved way, they are also able to demonstrate their mastery. Okay, so I know that now if I just talk like that without any hands-on, it may be a bit foreign to you, but just keep in mind that there are all these modes available, okay, and there are all these possible ways of implementing it in your classroom, whether it's before class, during class, or after class. So during the hands-on sharing later, have also keep in mind, right, how you may want to tap on this system to enhance some of the teaching and learning in your classrooms. Okay, these are just an examples, right, of how the learning modes can be used. Right, we'll talk a bit more about it during the hands-on segment. Okay, and during the demonstration later, we will also go through a bit about the learning progress dashboard. Okay, basically, it's where we obtain the data. Right? And when I say we, it's not just the teachers, it is also the students, right? So when students access the learning progress dashboard, the previous slide, when students access the learning progress dashboard, right, actually what happens is that, you know, I can actually have my own, okay, kind of progress chart, if you like. And that helps me perhaps inform myself as a student where exactly I need to reinforce, perhaps, or revise. Okay, from the teacher's perspective, right, on the from the data side, okay, I can also monitor the progress of the class by the topic level, okay, meaning to say as a class, right, what is the mastery like? I can also monitor at the student level. That means each student, where exactly. I've covered the names here because I don't want to show the names of the students here. Okay, but I can also just see that, you know, each student, right, where exactly are they in terms of mastery. Okay. So all these are just sharing. Okay, now I'm just going to move very quickly to the hands-on component. But before that, in the confirmation email that was auto-generated by FormSG, right? It says that please ensure that you have been added to a class group. Now, all the participants who have registered via FormSG, I've actually added you to a Set 1 class group already. Okay, and the purpose of doing this, right, is really for all of us to be able to access the ALS as a student. Okay, in our normal teaching and learning, okay, you don't have to do this. It's really just for the purposes of today's workshop. We are going to add you as a student so that later on when you toggle to the student mode, right, okay, then you will be able to access this adaptive learning. Now, having said that, I was doing this trial run with another of the secondary maths LPL workshop. Okay, it may be the case that a few of you, even after being added to a class group, okay, you may still not be able to see the adaptive learning part of it. Okay, in that case, later on, if there are such cases, we will just direct you to lodge a ticket with the SLS help desk. Okay. Now, I also understand that there are a few of you who are attending like a webcast, meaning to say that you didn't register, okay, but you are also attending, let's say, in the department office and so on. Okay, so actually during the demo later, my colleague will run through with you how to add yourself to a Sec 1 class group so that you are able to access the ALS. Okay, my final point before we move on to the hands-on part is that if you have a separate device, okay, let's say even your handphone or maybe you have another laptop, right? Okay, or you can borrow your colleague's laptop. It will be useful because then you can use this laptop to try and follow the sharing as well as the hands-on by my colleague. But it's not mandatory, okay? It's not mandatory. We will try our best to facilitate the hands-on in a manner that allows all of us to keep up, right? And then later on, we will take some questions after that. Okay, so at this point, I will just perhaps hand the time to Hui Ming, and then you can just proceed with the next part.